Welcome back to the Speed Shed. My last video said that we're going to do a few videos looking at some mates' boats and that sort of thing. As you can see, I'm sitting on a boat that's not quite mine. We are doing some work on this boat at the moment, which we're going to have a bit of a look at, and we're here at GBEX Solutions with Glenn, and he's going to give us a few pointers on lining shafts and things like that, and a few little things that we might see, or he might see, that are issues, common issues with people with their boats and that sort of thing. So as we're sort of setting up this boat, it is being set up with an LS, which you can maybe see behind me. Oh, there we go, sneak peek. We're going to be changing quite a few things, so we're going to have a look at a few things as we're going there and see what needs to be done and what can be improved based on what common mistakes people normally make. Alright, so we're here looking at this shaft alignment on this boat. The gearbox is being set up again, so new cross members being put in for the gearbox. We're aligning the shaft with the shaft sitting in the skeg, and then we're sort of aligning the gearbox to that. So we're going to have a quick look at a few of the issues that we have with those. Now, if you're like me, you probably push it into the coupling and then line it up, and you can probably tell by Glenn's face there that's not quite the correct thing to do, and not his favourite thing either. If you tell him that, he probably will slap you, so maybe don't. There is tools that you can use to align the shaft properly. Sticking it in that and hoping for the best is not quite the best case. These things themselves are not fantastic either, and we'll run one of those up a bit later on, and we'll show you what the dealio is with those. Alright, so do you want to give us a bit of a rundown on what your normal process is, please, Glenn?
Okay, so shaft alignment tools, flanges, so they're faced together in the machine, so they're faced and bored at the same time, so we know they're perfectly square. This one suits 1 inch shaft. So what we normally do is we don't use the coupling to align it. We slide the shaft into the gearbox flange, and then we push that one up like that. So now we'll get a good outside number to make sure that's nice and straight. Plus, we can put the feeler gauges in between it, and we hold it up, and it gives us a nice, to make sure that nice and tight either side, to make sure that the box is nice and square with the shaft. So that's the way to do it, that's the way to line it up. Otherwise, you're going to put a lot of pressure on the gearbox output bearings, plus the skeg bush down the back there. It's not going to last very long if you don't get this nice and straight. So that's the way to do it. That's the way we've done it for a while. Seems to work the best. We get it within 0.1 of a mil, which is 1/4 hour in the old scale.
So you've also got to take into account when aligning your shafts with these boats, especially new setups or existing setups as well. We were talking about the two mating surfaces being parallel to each other. You also got to take into account the shaft coming through the log there. So you can see there's a fair bit of flex in there. Obviously we want to try and get that centered, and that's going to come down to your skeg angle as well, which is going to take a bit of playing around with the skeg angle when that's being bolted in, so that you can get that roughly at the right angle so that it's coming through. Now obviously sometimes these are set up by hand, they're not done with jigs or anything like that when their boats are manufactured, so you can get some variances in there. So often the actual shaft will be touching on the inside of the log or underneath the hull. So this one was actually touching as well. It sort of worn the existing shaft. That's why we're sort of doing all this work, try and get it lined up correctly.
So I just want to touch on couplings for a sec. Few different styles, the different types, obviously longer and shorter ones. All these came off race boats. So yeah, even though this one is definitely probably not designed for a lot of power. Also, people use screwdrivers to spread them and open them, as opposed to the jacking bolts that they have in them. So nothing wrong with a single split coupling. It's still a good unit, still does the job quite nicely.
So just run us through the jacking bolt. What's the idea of that?
So single split. So you put the 2 bolts in there, one either side, and then that jacks it apart, and then you can slide the shafts out. So the shafts shouldn't slide in and out without the jacking bolts. If they do, that means that the coupling is stretched and potentially can crack through the keyway and fail. So if it's stretched, it's also, you might have premature wear on the gearbox output shaft or the end of the prop shaft.
Now, I'll just touch on quickly. I used to have one of these in my boat. It was doing, I think, 65 mile an hour or something at ski racing. I'm pretty sure it was just a 2-bolt one, and it split on the trailer. Somehow it didn't go through the bottom of the boat, but it wasn't pretty. It did split. We were setting timing, sort of revving it up, and gearbox decided to jump into gear, and it split that coupling off, which is not particularly pretty. So
no,
couplings aren't couplings. That's pretty correct.
Yeah. So, and they do have a lifespan. You can't continually run. They often get forgotten and just thrown back on. But yeah, they definitely have a lifespan. Here's one that we've set up that did come off a race boat. I have a gearbox output shaft in the lathe that I've set up true on that indicator, and you can see that the run out on that indicator when this one's still on nil. The reason being is when they get made, the coupling gets bored in the lathe halfway, and then it gets taken out and turned around, and then the other side gets bored, so it doesn't get bored in one go, which allows for that sort of run out. So if it's got run out over 120 mil, imagine what it's doing on an 1800 long prop shaft. So that's scary there. So couplings definitely aren't couplings.
So how much is that moving on the gauge?
So on the gauge, it's moving just 0.9 of a mil.
0.9 of a mil.
So nearly 1 mil, which doesn't sound a whole lot, but like I said, if you take it over a 1.8 meter long prop shaft, it's whipping around this, and this coupling here is trying to control it. And as you can see on this one, it definitely looks like it's been tried to be opened with a screwdriver instead of using the jacking bolts to spread. But actually this one is worn as well. I didn't need to jack it apart when I slid those shafts in. So this is a 1-inch prop shaft out of Dr. Danger, out of Brent's boat. This was a learning curve for him. He used the coupling instead of the flanges to line it up. So we've got quite a bit of shaft wear down here, which you can see that's neat on there. The mic's neat on there, and now this is the rear skeg bush gap, and that's shaft wear. And the front one is not as bad, but it's certainly still there. So we've got, and there's a little bit of heating on that shaft as well. So as we go up, the shaft was hitting the bottom of the boat just from misalignment. You can see, I don't know if the camera picks it up, but there's a hot spot there and plenty of rub marks along it and a little further up. As we come inside the boat now, there is a log seal, they call them, so this stops the water from coming into the boat. It's which has burn marks from the O-rings, so it just wasn't greased enough to suit it. Also heat marks on that, and then right at the end you can see some wear marks where the coupling was working fairly hard on the end of the shaft because things just weren't lined up. So it just goes to show the very importance of just having things lined up straight. So the boat will be getting a new shaft. Okay, so on Brent's prop shaft, the front skeg bush position has prematurely worn. That's because he fitted some new skeg bush to the front, but once the skeg bush is fitted to the skeg, then it needs to be reamed to 1 inch. If you leave it unreamed, it's far too tight on the shaft, and it will definitely wear that shaft down and potentially break it if it gets too bad. So please ream out the skeg bush once it's been fitted to the skegs.
If you don't know how to do that, ask someone who knows.
Definitely ask.
Can say as well, I have been guilty of this as well, putting skeg bush in and then whacking the old shaft in there and hoping for the best. So, but that's how you do end up with these sort of issues. So we're having a bit of a bet on the weight of the hull. Brent's talking some mad smack about how light the boat is and he can pick it up on the end of his little finger or something like that, I think he said. So it's skewed everyone's weights a little bit. We've probably gone a little bit lighter than we normally would, but it is a fairly light boat. So Glenn's running with 310 kilos, Joel with 278. Brent's said 300. I've said 334, just hoping it goes the other way and it gets a little bit heavier, but we'll see what we get in a second when we pick it up on the gantry, and we've got some scales there. We'll see what we can get. So we've got Brent here, who is the owner of Dr. Danger, had the boat for quite a while, so he's going to give us a bit of a rundown on what his plans are with the boat, what we're doing. Obviously you can see the beautiful plastic fantastic, the LS Juan in front of him, and that's what's going into the boat. But what's the plan, Brent? What came out of the boat? What's going in it? What are you doing?
So yeah, g'day guys. This is my 18'6" Everingham, roughly 1991 model, shallow V, so specifically built for circuit racing. Was set up originally, and when I got it, as more I suppose you could call like a social ski boat. Had a small block Chev in it, just a crate motor, like 300 horse crate motor, so very mild. I've had it for probably 10 years now, just over 10 years. It was originally white and blue, so I destroyed my ankle in 2016, had a lot of spare time, so I thought I'd give it a paint job and tidy it up. I think it came out pretty sweet. So usually just used it for hooning around with Craig and Joel out of the dam and doing a little bit of tubing and skiing and stuff with it. And then once Craig started racing, sort of got sick of helping and wanted to have a go myself. So thought I'd better have a crack. Raced last year, did the 3 meetings at our club, managed to pick up top points equally for the year, so that was pretty cool. Went down to Sydney in January for the bad boats, and Buddy had this LS sitting in his shed, so I had no real ambition of changing the motor at that point. It was more, I'd entertained the idea of doing a bit of work to the boat and maybe a little bit of engine work to the small block to get a bit more speed out of it. But to be fair, you got to spend quite a bit of money on them. You can't just spend a little bit, you got to spend a lot to make them, sort of hand. You can't really just do a little bit up here, you got to do a little bit in a lot of places to get reliable, consistent horsepower out of them that's going to handle being thrashed. So when I saw this, I sort of had the harebrained idea that maybe I could get rid of the small block, set this up in there, and really just sort of looking more for the future. Not that it's going to gain a lot more horsepower, it's probably more the accessibility of parts for these is a little more common and probably cheaper than the small block. So in the future, if I do want to do a bit of work to it and gain a bit more speed and horsepower, then it's probably the better way to go about it. As we've found out, it's considerably lighter than the small block, which is cool. So we're currently in the process of sitting this in the boat, finding out where the balance point is of the hull and with everything sitting inside it, because that plays a massive part to, well, with how it can handle and basically handle having everything in the boat. So thank you to Glenn for all of his help so far, because it's you're talking millimeters. It's not just a matter of just throwing it in and hoping for the best. Moving it minuscule amounts can make quite a bit of difference. So the motor was sort of just a small part of it. It was more, if we're going to do the motor, well, we really need to look at all the other things that are in the boat to probably upgrade things, because nothing's really been changed or upgraded since it was probably built, which is great for what it was. But now that I'm starting to do a bit more racing, you start to thrash on things. Things don't handle stuff when they're really old, so things are wearing out, and it's probably more about, for me, the safety side of things too. Things like the gearbox needs a whirl away in it, so that's like a safety feature that stops things, and Glenn will probably touch on that in some other tech videos that we do. But yeah, it's definitely a big job, but it's something that you probably have to think about doing if you've got an older boat and you want to start thrashing on it. It'll get to a point where you're just going to wear things out and do a lot of damage, or potentially throw yourself out, which I've heard isn't overly fun. Can confirm. I know a bloke that did it, and it's quite spectacular. So that's pretty much in a nutshell what we're looking at, and what the plan is so far. So at the moment, the motor, it was sort of just mocking things up. So you can see we've done a rough engine plate to try and work out some heights and basically work out where it needs to be sitting in the boat, the shape and design of bracketry around the side of the motor. Obviously, water pump, we're still going to mount tensioners and pulleys, alternator down here. We'll be running a heat exchanger in the boat moving forward, which I didn't with the small block. So the small block used to just suck, it was a cam driven water pump, it would suck water in from the bottom of the boat, cool the engine and just throw it out the exhaust. This way with a heat exchanger, sort of basically the easiest way to explain is like a radiator. It's a closed loop, stops a lot of thermal spike, you can control your temperature, you're not stressing the engine by just slamming raw dog and cold water in there. It's just a way of keeping things a little more happy. So still a hell of a lot to do, but thankfully I've got a lot of great people who are helping me, and fortunately the place that I work at, they're awesome, and I've got a lot of machinery and tools that I can have at my disposal to make stuff. So yeah, at the moment we're sort of only just starting to get into it, but we've worked out a fair bit. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
All right, that's going to wrap this one up. It's pretty late, it's about 1:30 in the morning, just got home, did run out of camera battery, so didn't really get the end there, but there wasn't much to see anyway. We sort of got that engine mounted and saw what we needed to do, make sure everything was all sweet. Glenn is a friend of ours, so thankfully he's lending a bit of a hand to point Brent in the right direction, make sure everything's looking sweet. It's not the sort of work that he normally does anymore. It gets in the way of his normal sort of work that pays the bills. So race boats, funnily enough, don't pay the bills because there's so many hours involved. I think between mounting those, the gearbox brackets and the actual gearbox, getting everything aligned, put in about 4 hours in there. So it's you know, a fair few hours can be burnt up on these things. We thought it'd be a good idea to just show some people, just so that get an idea of what's involved. If you're new, or even if you're experienced, might pick up a few pointers there. I've watched a few bits of the footage back, playing with these microphones that I've got, and they're pretty new, so getting the positions right, some of the audio levels are a bit funky, so bear with me there. And also, whilst I get back into the swing of making content and not saying all the ums and ahs and repeating myself and doing all the weird things that I do with my face and all those sorts of things. So hang out, hopefully it gets a little bit more comfortable and we should be pretty sweet. That one's going to wrap it up. Don't forget to do all the YouTube likes and subscribes and all that sort of thing. Pole One Products gets your merch. We've got some t-shirts out there now, hats coming soon hopefully. I think that's going to be it. We'll see you on the next one. Catch ya. You want to jump on the other side, see if we're both in the... Ooh.
Gibraltar!